Hi everyone, let's talk now about SVG. So SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphics, and it's a technology that allows you to create charts or graphics or any type of drawing using primitives. So it's actually perfect for visualizations. You're going to see later a comparison with Canvas that generates like rasterized images or like bitmap-based images. In this case, you're actually having marks that you can scale and will look very well regardless of what resolution you're looking at them. So I recommend you taking a look at the Mozilla Developer Network page for SVG, which usually just search for MDN SVG, and then you're going to find a lot of examples in here. And I especially recommend you taking a look at this element reference that includes many of the things that you can be creating inside SVGs. And actually, those are the ones that we are going to be using for creating visualizations. So we have a notebook in here. If you want to start using SVG, basically what you do is to start creating SVG elements inside an HTML. So inside observable, you can just create a variable that contains an element using the HTML, how you use that called, I think, literal. And then you just say, I'm going to create an SVG in here, and that's your SVG. And then you can change, like for instance, one of the things that works very well in observable is changing the view box. And what that thing does is that it sets what's the coordinates, like the range and like the width and the height for the page. And then, of course, I'm getting an error in here. So, unexpected token. What did I do? View box like this, maybe. Oh, yes. It's because I'm already using the other. Oh, I don't need it then. My bad. So since I'm already inside a literal, then I don't need to add a new one. Sorry about that. Now it's complaining that we don't have a height, so let's use something like 0.4 of the width, okay? So the nice thing about that view box is that it's going to allow us to stretch the SVG. Now, inside the SVG, you put whatever element you want. Remember, those are elements that come from here. So for instance, say that you want to create circles. So here you have your circle. And then if you just copy something like this, and then you put that in here, then you get a circle. And then you can start changing the parameters for that. So as you can see, we have a tag. It's a self-closing tag because it doesn't have any elements. So that's why it's closing like this. The alternative will be to have something like this. But since it doesn't have any contents, then you can just close it like this. It's shorter. And then it has what is the radius. You can say it's 5 points or 50, the X and Y position. Notice that this is center X and center Y, okay? So now I can also say, like, this is going to have a still blue color, and then, for instance, have the stroke to be like lime green or something like that. It's like maybe not too contrasty, so Fabric can be better. And you can always find other colors for that. So for instance, we can say like maybe it's black, just the border, that looks better. And then you can also change the stroke width. If you want to know which things or what attributes you have, you go to the reference, and then I think here is a list of some of the attributes. And then it says that it also inherits some of the attributes that come from other elements, like for instance stroke, like here is the stroke dash array. So there's a ton of things that you can use with that, okay? So coming back in here, if you want to create more circles, then you can just do that and then just change the position like something like that, and then you have a bunch of them, okay? So if you want to create, for instance, a rectangle, so it's exactly the same thing. You say I'm going to create a rectangle. In this case, let me close it. I'm going to have a weight of say 20 and a height of also 20. And then there's your rectangle. You can make this one bigger. That seems to be like a bar chart. And then you can just position that bar chart in like X and Y. So if you go to position 200 in X, then it doesn't work. Let's try it like this. There we go. And then that's an ugly color, so let's change it to still blue. And then if you actually go it lower, then you need to move Y. So this is interesting because if you notice, actually the 0 position is the top. So that's something that we are going to be fighting when we create bar charts on D3, because bar charts usually start from the bottom, not from the top. So because of that, then we will have actually to compute the difference of that. Like for instance, in this case, this could be something like the height minus the 200. That is the position that we have. There we go. So now it's actually starting on the bottom and then returning to whatever height you want. You can also draw lines, for instance. So if you draw a line, then you get an x1 and x2. So for instance, let's say this goes from 0, or actually let's say on 10, and then x2 it's going to be also 10, and then y1 it's going to be 0, and then y2 is going to be, I don't know, like the height, for instance. Remember that this is kind of like inverted. It goes reversed, and then we need to change the stroke color for this. It's kind of like a typical error that you'll get, and then you get a line. That seems kind of like an axis, and then you can draw elements in that. So how do you create visualizations with this? So let's create some data. So basically in here, I'm just going to create a new array from, and then say this is going to have a length of, I don't know, 50 points or something like that, or 100 points. And then from that, I'm actually going to map that into a function again, remember that I'm putting that inside parentheses, because otherwise the arrow function thinks that those are the brackets for defining the function. And then I'm going to set up 2 parameters, like the position on x, that is going to be a mat random multiplied by the width, and then the position on y, that is going to be same thing with this, okay? So now, if you actually want to create a chart with that, then you can do it this way. Basically, let's close that. And then what we can do is we actually can play with the fact that this is a literal. So I can just put inside that and then go and iterate over my data. And then on that data, I can say each one of these is going to be returning an SVG, no, a circle. And then I can say this is going to be of radius 5. And of course, I have an error token. Oh, yes. So let's use this one rather. So literals. And then that puts all of the dots in there. And then if I actually want to distribute it on the screen, then I can say that x, it's going to be whatever attribute you have on your x variable. And then y, it's going to be whatever attribute you have on your y variable. And this is per each one of your data elements. So, oh yes, remember in circles, this is center x and center y. Typical mistake. And then you can even change that with CSS. So in observable, you can do that just by using something like this. And then you say, for instance, that this is going to be a style, and then let's close the style. And then we can say that all of the circles, in this case, are going to have a filling of steel blue. Since these are HTML elements, then you can change those parameters very easily. F0, something like that. Okay, with a very ugly green. Okay. So since these are elements, then you can change all of their properties. You can even make them bigger just by, or changing the color depending if they are hovered or not. Like for instance, you can say that whenever they are hovered, then you change to fabric, and then as you can see, it changes color. Okay, so that will be the way we create a visualization. When you actually look at the code of this, you can do that by right-clicking in here and then saying inspect. And then as you're going to see in here, it's just generating like 50 lines of circles, putting the positions based on the data. With D3 and pretty much Vegalite, if you use SVG, that's what those libraries are going to be doing. So keep in mind, basically in there, what we are doing is just modifying the DOM, that is the HTML representation that the the browser keeps in memory for rendering things, and that's how you create those visualizations. If you want to create text, then you can just put a text tag next to it, probably something like this. I think we can do, I can leverage these things. With text, it's actually X and Y instead of CX and CY. I think I can put this in a new line, and then I need to close this. Text does have some content, like for instance, Berkeley, and then you have Berkeley everywhere. And then like say that you want to actually say d.x, comma, d.y, and then you get the numbers in there. You can actually do some formatting if you want, so let's keep that in mind, okay? So that it's up to there. The other thing I wanted to explain are paths. So in SVG, when we drew this line, we only were able to actually use 2 points, like x1, x2, y1, y2. If you actually want to create something like a line chart, then you need to create something a little bit more advanced. So in that case, let's do this once more. And then again, let's do it like this. And then when you create paths, so basically the way you do this is that you say, I'm going to be creating a path that doesn't have any content. And then you have this M attribute that is quite weird. So basically in there, what you say is that I want to move to position 0, 0. And then I want to, I think it's something like this. And then I want to draw a line to position 200, 200. And then you need to make sure that this has a stroke color. And then there you have your line. And if you want to keep on drawing lines, then you can say like maybe the next one is 250, I don't know, 150. And when it goes up, and then another line that goes to 300 with, and then notice that I didn't even include this. So it can be 300 with, I don't know, 350. So it goes down. And then notice that it actually started creating an area. So when you want to create an area chart, you also use paths. The difference between those two is if you actually want to use this or not, if you want to use a fill-in or not. So this is important because when you want to create a line chart, you only create one element with a lot of these things. And actually you use, if you're doing it with D3, you use a D3 function that generates that. If you want to create a scatter plot with this same data, basically, so actually that's an interesting one. So let's say that we draw like that. I hate those letters, so let's put this like a Berkeley only, like a B. And then let's say that we also want to create a line chart in here. So let me copy this code and then put it in here. And then I want to draw a line across all of the elements, and this is going to look very ugly, but whatever. So basically the way I do that is that I do something like this. I say it's going to be like still blue, and then I am going to have a fill of none, and finally I need to generate the D, okay? And for the D I can get something that is like a get line, that in this case we can make as a function in here out of the data. And then we can get a getLine function. Let's see if I can pull this one off. And then basically what this thing is going to return, it's so let's create a return. And this starts with M of this might be harder than I thought. So anyhow, like we take the first element and then we say data.x and then data.y. So I'm pretty much re-implementing part of D3 here, and then return these rigs here. And then I need to start drawing the line across all of the different elements. So let's see if I can figure this one out. So it could be something like reduce. And then remember that when you are doing a reducer, you have like the previous one and then the datum. And then that's going to be returning the previous plus, and then a line, that's what I wanted to see, from so this is going to be each one of the numbers, .x and d.y. And then I can close this, and I just need to make sure that this one starts with a string, and then I can reduce that. So now let me see what getLine is generating out of the data. And then I see it has the first part, and then this one, it's not being added in there. Oops. Plus equal, there we go. And then it's creating like maybe an extra space in here. Let's put something like this in here. Something like that in here. And then it's like this, like that. And then you have the line. And if you actually want it to be sorted, then you can actually sort the data. And I forgot to explain that in the array methods. In the sort, basically, you have to pass two parameters. And then it's A and B, or whatever names you want to provide. And then you have to say using what attribute you're going to be comparing them. So you use, in this case, let's use X. And then I can say that I'm going to be comparing them on X. And then voila, you have that element. So if you actually go and see this on the inspector, then you're going to notice that you have a bunch of circles, a ton of circles, but only one path with a very long D. That is this one in here. So that's important to keep in mind. And that is an introduction on SVG. You're going to be using, like, these are the basics, like maybe something else that you can create is groupings. And these groupings, like that could be like a third thing in here. So basically with these groupings, what you can do is that you say these two things, the circle and the text, are going to be inside the group. And then instead of changing the CX and CY of each one of those, I'm only going to be changing it in here. I wonder if that works. Maybe I need to do a translation. So I'm going to check. And then we put that in there. Of course, that didn't work. So then basically, let's try with the translate. So I'm going to do a transform. That's changing this attribute, and that changes the translate. So basically what I'm saying is translate that group, everything that it's inside that group, to this position in X and Y, okay? And then that still doesn't work. Translate, I have that, I have this other element, I don't need this, there we go, beautiful. So notice how I don't need now to actually provide like the position for this circle and the other one, because they are included in there. So whenever you move that grouping, everything that it's inside moves. That it's convenient for generating code that it's cleaner, especially with D3. So as I was saying, this is just an introduction of SVG. I recommend you taking a look at all of these things. There's a ton of things that you can create with SVGs. But those are kind of like the basics that you're going to be using for visualization. But still, take a look at this page. There's a ton of other things you can do, like clipping areas, and also changing colors and patterns and things like that. So if you're interested, take a look, and that could give you more advanced things.